What if I told you that everything you've been told about buying a house as the ultimate investment is mathematically wrong for our generation? That the numbers have shifted so dramatically that what worked for your parents is now a financial trap waiting to spring. I'm Tom, and this is Tom Thinks. I'm here to cut through the Wall Street jargon and give you the real talk on your money, even if it hurts your feelings a little bit. The broken math. Look, let's start with the most basic, undeniable truth about housing right now. The math has completely exploded, and I don't mean it's gotten a little harder. I mean the fundamental relationship between what you earn and what a house costs has been shattered. Since 1985, housing costs have increased by 408%. Let that number sink in. 408%. Now, here's the secret that nobody wants to talk about. In that same time frame, wages have only gone up by 241%. Do you see the gap? That's not a small difference. That's a chasm. That's the Grand Canyon of financial inequality opening up between what you can earn and what you need to spend on shelter. And honestly, this gap isn't static. It widens with every single passing year. Every month that goes by, the distance between what you make and what a house costs gets just a little bit bigger. It's like trying to run on a treadmill that's constantly speeding up. You might be running faster, working harder, getting promotions, but the finish line keeps moving further away. Now I know what you're thinking, but Tom, every generation had challenges. And you're right, they did. But show me another 75-year period in American history where a core life milestone became 4 times less achievable. 4 times. That's not a challenge. That's a statistical reality. That's the game changing in ways that make the old rules completely irrelevant. When I look at these numbers, what I see isn't just inflation. What I see is a fundamental breakdown in economic ratios. The relationship between housing costs and wages used to be something you could plan around. It used to be predictable. Now it's like trying to predict the weather in a hurricane. You might get the general direction right, but the actual numbers will blow you away every single time. And here's what really keeps me up at night. This isn't about work ethic. This isn't about avocado toast or streaming subscriptions. This is pure, cold, hard economics. The game has changed. The math has changed. And the outcomes have all changed with them. We're playing a completely different sport, with the rule book from a different era. Stick with me here, because this is where it gets interesting. When these fundamental ratios break, everything that was built on them starts to crumble. All the traditional advice, all the common sense financial wisdom, all the "this is how we did it" stories from older generations, they all become relics. They become like trying to use a map from 1950 to navigate a city that's been completely rebuilt. Streets might have the same names, but nothing is where it's supposed to be. The down payment trap. Now let's talk about the 20% down payment. You've heard this your entire life. Save 20% for a down payment. It's financial gospel. It's what your parents did. It's what your grandparents did. But here's the brutal truth. That advice hits completely different when you actually run the numbers. Homes cost 5.3 times annual income instead of 3.6 times. Saving 20% becomes a mathematical nightmare. Let me break this down for you. If the average home costs 5.3 times your annual income, and you need 20% of that as a down payment, you're looking at needing more than 1 full year's salary just for the down payment. More than 1 year of every single dollar you earn before taxes, before rent, before food, before anything. Now compare that to when homes cost 3.6 times annual income. The 20% down payment there is 0.72 years of income. That's still a lot, but it's achievable. It's within the realm of possibility. But more than a full year's salary, that's not saving. That's a financial Everest that most people will never climb. And honestly, this is where the psychological damage happens. People look at that number, that more than 1 year's salary number, and they feel like failures. They think, I must be doing something wrong. I must not be working hard enough. I must not be saving aggressively enough. But the truth is, the goalposts have moved. The mountain has gotten taller while you were still trying to find your climbing shoes. Let me give you a concrete example. Say you make $70,000 a year, a decent income in most parts of the country. At 5.3 times income, you're looking at a $371,000 home. 20% of that is $74,200. You need to save $74,200. That's more than your entire annual salary. Now, let's be realistic. How long does it take to save $74,200 when you're paying rent, student loans, car payments, and trying to actually live your life? Even if you could save 20% of your income, which is incredibly aggressive, that's $14,000 a year. It would take you over 5 years to save that down payment. 5 years of living like a monk. 5 years of saying no to everything. 5 years while housing prices continue to rise. So by the time you save your $74,000, the home that cost $371,000 now costs $400,000, and your down payment needs to be $80,000. You're chasing a moving target that's accelerating away from you. This isn't a savings problem. This is a mathematical impossibility for most people. The system has been designed in a way that makes the traditional path to homeownership a trap. You either take on massive debt with a small down payment and pay thousands in mortgage insurance, or you spend years saving only to watch the goal move further away. It's a lose-lose situation. And the worst part, nobody's having this conversation. Everyone's still repeating the save 20% mantra like it's 1985. The income-to-home price ratio. Moving on to what might be the most important number nobody talks about. The income-to-home price ratio. This is the secret sauce of housing affordability. This is the number that tells you whether buying a house is a reasonable financial decision or a mathematical nightmare. And right now, that number is screaming at us to pay attention. Historically, homes cost about 3.6 times annual income. That was the norm. That was the equilibrium point where buying made sense. Today, homes cost 5.3 times annual income. That difference might not sound huge when I say it like that, but let me show you what it actually means in real dollars and real life. At 3.6 times income, if you make $70,000 a year, you're looking at a $252,000 home. Your mortgage payment on that, with 20% down and a reasonable interest rate, would be manageable. It would be a stretch, but it would be within the realm of possibility. At 5.3 times income, that same $70,000 salary gets you a $371,000 home. The mortgage payment on that is dramatically higher. We're talking hundreds of dollars more per month, thousands more per year. Over the life of a 30-year mortgage, we're talking about an extra couple $100,000 in payments. But here's where it gets really interesting. This ratio affects everything. It affects how much you need to earn to qualify for a mortgage. It affects how much of your income goes toward housing. It affects what you have left over for everything else in your life. And honestly, it affects your entire financial future. When housing costs 5.3 times your income instead of 3.6, you're committing a much larger percentage of your future earnings to your mortgage. You're locking yourself into a payment that leaves less room for error, less room for emergencies, less room for life to happen. And life always happens. Cars break down, medical emergencies occur, jobs change, children arrive. When your housing costs are this high relative to your income, you have no cushion. You're living on the financial edge every single month. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. But Tom, what about dual incomes? What about getting married and having 2 salaries? Stick with me here because this is crucial. Even with dual incomes, the math is still brutal. Let's say you and your partner both make $70,000. That's $140,000 combined. At 5.3 times income, you're looking at a $742,000 home. 20% down is $148,400. You need almost $150,000 just for the down payment. Your mortgage payment, it's going to be enormous. You're both working full-time jobs just to keep a roof over your head. And what happens if one of you loses a job? What happens if you want to have children and one income drops or disappears temporarily? The system has no give, no flexibility. The ratios are so tight that any disruption becomes a crisis. This is why getting married young hits different today. It's not that people don't want to settle down. It's that settling down means committing to a financial burden that previous generations never had to face. It means signing up for a level of financial stress that changes relationships, changes life decisions, changes everything. The income-to-home price ratio isn't just a number. It's a predictor of financial stress. It's a measure of how much of your life energy you'll have to devote to shelter versus everything else that makes life worth living. The marriage and housing connection. To understand this better, let's look at the data on marriage and homeownership. Since 1950, the percentage of people who are both married and homeowners by age 30 has dropped from 50% to 12%. Let me repeat that. From 50% to 12%, that's not a gradual decline. That's a collapse. That's the American dream becoming statistically unreachable for 88% of people. Now, here's the secret that most people miss when they look at these numbers. This isn't just about changing social norms. This isn't just about people wanting to wait longer to get married. This is about economics driving social change. When the math makes something impossible, people stop trying to do it, or they delay it until the math might work better. But what if the math never works better? What if this is the new normal? Look at the marriage age data. In the 1960s, the median age for recent marriage was around 20.3 years for women and 22.8 years for men. Today, it's about 28.4 years for women and 30.2 years for men. That's a massive shift. 8 years later for women, 7.4 years later for men. And here's what's really happening. People aren't delaying marriage because they don't want to settle down. They're delaying marriage because they can't afford to settle down. They're waiting until they're financially stable enough to even consider buying a home. But with housing costs rising faster than wages, that financial stability keeps getting pushed further into the future. It's like trying to catch a train that's leaving the station faster than you can run. You might be running as fast as you can, but the train is accelerating away from you. And honestly, this creates a vicious cycle. You delay marriage because you can't afford a home. But by delaying marriage, you delay combining incomes. And by delaying combining incomes, you make it even harder to save for that down payment. It's a catch-22 that traps people in a state of permanent financial adolescence. They're adults with careers, with responsibilities, but without the traditional markers of adult stability. Now some people will point to individual success stories. I bought my recent home at 23. I did it with hard work and sacrifice, and those stories are true. But they're the exceptions, not the rule. They're the statistical outliers in a system that's fundamentally broken for most people. When only 12% of people can achieve what 50% used to achieve, that's not a personal failure problem. That's a systemic problem. That's the math telling us that the game has changed. And here's what really worries me. What happens when core stability markers become statistically unreachable for 88% of people? What happens to a society where the traditional path to stability, marriage, homeownership, family, is only available to a small minority? Do we redefine success? Or do we fix the math? Because right now, we're trying to fit new economic realities into old social expectations. And it's creating a generation of people who feel like they're failing, when really, the system has failed them. The system shift. Let's talk about how the entire system has shifted while nobody was looking. This isn't just about housing prices going up. This is about every single part of the homeownership equation changing at once. And traditional advice hasn't caught up. In fact, traditional advice is now dangerous. It's leading people into financial decisions that made sense in a different era, but are catastrophic today. Let's talk about interest rates. When your parents bought their home, interest rates were different. Mortgage terms were different. The entire lending environment was different. Today's interest rates, combined with today's home prices, create monthly payments that are completely disconnected from historical norms. A mortgage that would have been comfortable 20 years ago is now a financial stranglehold. Second, property taxes. From the research, we see cities approving 20% property tax hikes. 20% in 1 year. When you're already stretched thin with a massive mortgage payment, a 20% increase in your property taxes can be the difference between making it and not making it. And these increases aren't rare anymore. They're becoming common as municipalities struggle with their own budgets. Third, insurance costs. Home insurance rates are skyrocketing. Climate change, construction costs, all of it is driving premiums higher and higher. What looked like an affordable payment when you bought the house can become unaffordable just a few years later, as these ancillary costs explode. Fourth, maintenance and repairs. The cost to fix anything in a house has gone through the roof. Literally, a new roof that cost $10,000 a decade ago might cost $25,000 today. Plumbing, electrical, HVAC, all of it costs dramatically more. And when you're already spending 50% of your income on your mortgage, where does the money for a new furnace come from? Now, here's where traditional advice becomes actively harmful. Buy the worst house in the best neighborhood and fix it up. That advice assumes that fixing up a house is affordable. It assumes that sweat equity can overcome financial limitations. But what happens when the cost of materials and labor makes even basic renovations prohibitively expensive? What happens when that fixer-upper needs $100,000 in repairs that you don't have? Stretch to buy because you'll grow into the payment. This might have worked when wages were rising faster than housing costs. But when wages are stagnant and housing costs are exploding, stretching means committing to a payment that might never become comfortable. It means betting your financial future on raises and promotions that might never come. Rent is throwing money away. This is perhaps the most dangerous piece of traditional advice. Because when buying means committing to a mortgage payment that's twice what rent would be, plus property taxes, plus insurance, plus maintenance, plus all the unexpected costs, renting starts to look pretty smart. Renting is a fixed cost. Buying is a variable cost with unlimited upside risk. And honestly, this system shift is creating entirely new financial realities. People who bought at the peak are trapped. They can't sell because they'd lose money. They can't refinance because rates are higher. They can't afford the maintenance their homes need. They're house rich and cash poor in ways that previous generations never experienced. The system has shifted. The expectations haven't. And that mismatch is where the mathematical nightmare lives. Redefining the dream. So where does this leave us? If buying a house right now is a mathematical nightmare for most people, what are the alternatives? What does financial success look like when the traditional path is broken? Arson, let's be brutally honest. For many people, renting might be the smarter financial move. Not forever, but for now. When you run the numbers, the actual math of total cost of ownership versus renting, in many markets, renting comes out ahead. You're not building equity, but you're also not on the hook for a new roof, a new furnace, property tax increases, or any of the other surprises that come with homeownership. Your housing cost is fixed, your risk is limited, and that stability has value. Second, let's talk about investing the difference. If your mortgage payment would be $3,000 a month, but you can rent for $2,000, that's $1,000 a month you can invest. $12,000 a year. Over 10 years with reasonable market returns that could grow to a substantial nest egg. Maybe even enough for a larger down payment later when the math makes more sense. Or maybe enough to achieve financial independence without ever owning a home. Third, consider alternative housing models. From the research, we're seeing office buildings converted to apartments. We're seeing zoning changes that allow duplexes and accessory dwelling units. We're seeing the missing middle housing movement gain traction. Maybe the future isn't single-family homeownership for everyone. Maybe it's owning a duplex and renting one side. Maybe it's a condo. Maybe it's a co-housing arrangement. The point is, the single-family detached home with a white picket fence might be an antiquated ideal for our current economic reality. Fourth, let's talk about geographic flexibility. One of the hidden costs of homeownership is being tied to a location. If a better job opportunity comes up in another city, you can't just move. You have to sell. And selling costs money. And in a down market, you might not be able to sell at all. Renting gives you flexibility. It gives you the ability to chase opportunities. In an economy that's increasingly mobile and uncertain, that flexibility has enormous value. Now I know what you're thinking, but Tom, I want to own a home, it's my dream. And I get it. I really do. The desire for stability, for a place that's yours, for something you can pass on to your children. These are powerful, legitimate desires. Here's the hard truth. Sometimes the smartest financial move is to delay a dream until the math works. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit that now is not the right time. And sometimes success means redefining what success looks like. Maybe success isn't homeownership by 30. Maybe it's financial stability by 35. Maybe it's having a robust investment portfolio by 40. Maybe it's the freedom to work less and live more. The American dream might need to be reevaluated. Not abandoned, but updated for new economic realities. Because when the math breaks, clinging to old definitions of success just leads to frustration and financial stress. The system has shifted. The expectations need to shift with it. And that starts with being honest about the numbers. It starts with admitting that buying a house right now, for most people, is a mathematical nightmare. And it continues with building a financial life that works within that reality, not against it. Because at the end of the day, the goal isn't homeownership. The goal is financial security, freedom, and a life well lived. And there are many paths to that goal, even when one of them is temporarily closed.
Found this interesting? Subscribe to the channel. Give this video a like, share it out, and drop your questions or ideas in the comments. Until our next adventure.